The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Who could have seen this coming? Elias Pettersson seems unlikely to suit up for the Vancouver Canucks tonight against the Seattle Kraken, and it's fair to wonder, has he played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy hump day, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks, and also a Canucks writer currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into it, we got to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks, because it is your Canucks every damn day. If you like what we're doing, make sure you go subscribe, like on YouTube, on the podcast side. Go follow us and leave a 5-star review. And don't do it for me. Don't do it for my family. But do it for Kyle Bowen, even though he quit on the show. What? More on that in a couple of minutes. It's also fair to wonder if Elias Pettersson, did he quit on the Vancouver Canucks? And that might seem a little dramatic, but the comments from Rick Tocchet yesterday had me thinking, has this guy actually played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks? So let's get into what's going on with Elias Pettersson, the comments from Rick Tocchet, and why there is a chance that Elias Pettersson may never suit up for the Vancouver Canucks again. Of course, unlikely, but albeit possible, and no one could have seen that coming. We'll also get into some news and notes from practice yesterday, updates on some of the other Canucks players, talk a bit about the Rick Tocchet contract situation, and preview the Canucks and Kraken tonight as well. But let's talk first and foremost about Elias Pettersson. And I think one of the most interesting things to come out of Rick Tocchet's media availability yesterday was the fact that he was very muted in his talk about Elias Pettersson returning to the lineup. And that was followed up by his comments about Nils Höglander. So he started by saying that Elias Pettersson has skated once or twice, he thinks, doing a light skate, but that he still feels some discomfort. Said it was an upper body injury, alluded to the fact that he didn't get injured in the face-off play that many of us thought he got injured in against the Rangers, but in fact it was from a board battle. And then he followed that up by talking about how Nils Höglander is chomping at the bit to get back into the lineup, and they got to hold this guy back because Nils Höglander wants to play so badly that they're worried about him hurting himself. And that's the kind of thing that you want to hear from your $11.6 million player compared to a guy who's making $1.1 million this season, right? And again, look, none of us know what's going on inside Elias Pettersson's head. And to his credit, he had played much better over a handful of games there prior to his injury. But we all know, it's no secret, Canucks fans know, the entire hockey world knows that Elias Pettersson has not been the same dominant force that he was early in his NHL career. And when Rick Tocchet makes comments like he did yesterday, just honestly taking some indirect shots at Elias Pettersson, especially when he's followed up by talking about how badly Nils Höglander wants to play. To me, that was a bit of a shot at Elias Pettersson. Like, look how badly Nils Höglander wants to play. You got a little bit discomfort and you don't want to play hockey games? Again, it's all hearsay, but there is something there when Rick Tocchet goes out of his way to praise Nils Höglander for battling so hard to get back into the lineup, whereas Elias Pettersson is not practicing due to some undisclosed discomfort. And look, the Rick Tocchet contract situation as well, I'll get into it later. I think it is mainly a non-story. I don't want to say it's blown up by Canucks media, but you got a team that's large into the playoff race and it becomes a big talking point, right? But Rick Tocchet, he is beloved by Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford, and I think he has a big say when it comes to the roster construction of this team moving forward. I mean, look at this guy calling Vincent Desharnais on July 1st and convincing him to come play for your Vancouver Canucks. And what does Vincent Desharnais have to do with Elias Pettersson? It's the Rick Tocchet influence. It's fair to wonder how Rick Tocchet feels about Elias Pettersson after this season. And look, he went out of his way early on not to chastise Elias Pettersson or bench him when he wasn't playing well. looks like behind the scenes that led to some conflict with JT Miller as well. Then he has his comments about PD. All you guys want to do is talk about PD. And now it feels like he is taking some subtle shots at his $11.6 million player. And look, I've said it time and time again, and everydayers know, I've probably been one of the biggest Elias Pettersson believers in this market. I think the guy has too much skill not to bounce back in some way, shape, or form. But it is fair to wonder if he will ever bounce back with the Vancouver Canucks. Sometimes players just need a fresh start. Obviously, a very different situation, but look at Todd Bertuzzi, right? He needed a fresh start. He said as much. JT Miller even said he needed a fresh start. It is fair to wonder if Elias Pettersson needs a fresh start. Now, look, we all know that no movement clause kicks in on July 1st, which makes a trade a little bit tougher. But I do think if a guy like Elias Pettersson gets traded, it's largely because he believes he needs a fresh start, not so much in the fact that the Canucks think that they need to move him and are worried about that no movement clause. I think the talk about the no movement clause is probably a bit overblown. But that being said, if Pettersson didn't want to go to a certain team, like the Buffalo Sabres, for instance, he could veto a trade with the no movement clause because he's got to sign off on everything at that point. So there is a bit of a ticking clock there as we wind down the season and get to the NHL draft. And in terms of the return for Elias Pettersson, let's highlight three of the biggest trades in the salary cap era and just look at the framework for, could you get this kind of return for Elias Pettersson? And I think I've said this before when I talked about trading Elias Pettersson being a mistake for the Vancouver Canucks. It's based on the fact that when you trade a player of his caliber, at least the Pettersson we used to know, you almost never win that trade. And let's look at the framework for three other big trades in the salary cap era. The three I've pulled are the Joe Thornton framework, the Jack Eichel framework, and the Ryan O'Reilly framework. So the Joe Thornton framework, that was likely the biggest loss in terms of trading a guy away, although it did set up the Bruins to usher in a new core and go on to win the Stanley Cup. Go F yourself, Boston. Anyways, Joe Thornton framework. He was traded for a top 6 winger in Marco Sturm, a top 4 defenseman in Brad Stewart, and a 29-year-old fourth liner in Wayne Primo. So if you want to look at a comparable return for that, if Elias Pettersson were to get dealt for that kind of package, I picked out Carolina in this instance, and you're looking at something like potentially a Seth Jarvis, Jalen Chatfield, and Mark Jankowski in exchange for Elias Pettersson. Now, of course, the big elephant in the room here is that Elias Pettersson has fallen so far from where he was that return doesn't seem all that bad. Seth Jarvis just played for Team Canada. Jalen Chatfield, another one who got away here in Vancouver. And Mark Jankowski, a solid, lanky fourth liner. I mean, that's probably not a bad package for Pettersson. But if he turns out to be another 100-point player, then it starts to look like a bit of a loss for the Vancouver Canucks, of course. Let's look at the Jack Eichel framework. So Jack Eichel was traded for a top 6 winger in Alex Tuch, a top prospect in Peyton Krebs, a first and a second round pick. So, you know, I picked Buffalo out for this instance, right? Maybe Buffalo for once ends up acquiring the so-called best player in the deal instead of dealing them away like they did with Jack Eichel and Ryan O'Reilly. So if we look at that framework, a top 6 winger and a top prospect, you know, with the Buffalo Sabres, I didn't want to include Alex Tuch in there again. That just seems like lazy work. But I had a package of Zach Benson, Yuri Kulich, a first and a second round pick. And that deal for the Canucks seems a little unlikely just based on the fact that they want to compete now. Do you think you can compete now with Zach Benson and Yuri Kulich in your lineup? I would argue that you might be able to, but again, lacking that number one center is a big miss for this team. And it's the reason why overall the Canucks are likely to keep Elias Pettersson. And I'll say that again, the Canucks are likely to keep Elias Pettersson. It makes most sense to see if he can bounce back, but I do believe that there is a world in which he has potentially played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks. Let's get to the last comparable deal in terms of frameworks of big deals in the salary cap era. Ryan O'Reilly. He was traded for a big young prospect center in Tage Thompson, a 30-year-old third liner, two 30-year-old third liners in Patrick Berling and Vladimir Sabatka, and a second-round pick. I picked out the Columbus Blue Jackets in this instance, and they have been linked to the Vancouver Canucks throughout the season in terms of big moves. And this, to me, is potentially the most intriguing deal for the Vancouver Canucks. But the package I had that's similar to the Ryan O'Reilly package was Caden Lindstrom, big center, selected 4th overall at last year's draft. Third liners in Sean Corrali. He's a UFA, but he just fits the bill here in terms of rugged third liners. Sean Corrali, Matthew Olivier. Shout out to Mother Knucker. It's his favorite player. Shout out to the everydayers here on Locked On Canucks. And, of course, a second-round pick. So just to repeat, Caden Lindstrom, Sean Corrali, Matthew Olivier, and a second-round pick. And you look at the Jack Eichel framework and the Ryan O'Reilly framework, they are largely future-based trades. But having a potential number one center in Caden Lindstrom, the way that the Buffalo Sabres gambled on Tage Thompson, which paid off for them. Unfortunately, they just couldn't build around him. But that might be the most likely way. That is the deal that has the most variability to it. That deal comes with the most risk. You're trading for a guy who is the main piece being 18, 19 years old right now, and then some spare parts. But that's the biggest high risk, high reward deal for the Vancouver Canucks if they are going to follow the frameworks of other big stars who were traded in the salary cap era. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Elias Pettersson has played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks? And if you do, he's got to get traded somewhere. What does that deal look like? What return are you comfortable with? I'm Trevor Beggs here on Locked On Canucks. Lots to get to on the other side. News and notes from the Vancouver Canucks. An update from my co-host, Kyle Bowen. Is he my co-host or did he quit on the show, man? Who knows? Find out on the other side. We'll also talk a little Kraken and Canucks as well. We'll be back on the other side after showing at our friends over at wonderful Pistachios. You're going to love my nuts, but the thing you'll love even more than my nuts is the nuts from wonderful Pistachios, because they aren't only just the tastiest nuts that you can pop in your mouth. It's the stack that's both delicious and nutritious, okay? Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts out there, okay? Kyle Bowen, I'm pretty sure he's drinking pistachio smoothies nowadays. Can you even do that? Can you turn a nut? If you could, okay, you know what? If you can make milk out of nuts, you can make a smoothie out of nuts, okay? So Kyle Bowen, he's out there having banana and pistachio protein shakes, man. Unbelievable stuff. Each 1 ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep you feeling fuller for longer. And you know me, I'm a savage, okay? And I don't like the teas. That's why I like the no shells variety from Wonderful Pistachios. Give me those naked nuts in my mouth all day long. And if you like the teas, the in-shell options from Wonderful Pistachios are also a classic favorite. So whether you like no shell or in-shell, they're all tasty nuts, baby. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. We're back here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. Again, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to Locked On, doing the most for sports fans across the world and for our show, man. Man, oh man, we appreciate the hell out of you for tuning in, okay? Because the Canucks, we know their playoff odds are at 10% or whatever it is right now. It is unlikely that they make the playoffs, but hey, so you're saying there's a chance. And if the Canucks win tonight, you know that we'll be spitting out that rhetoric here on Locked On Canucks. But regardless, it is more about the bigger picture right now. That's why, the biggest topic on my mind today was really Elias Pettersson and has he played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks. Philip Hedl. I mean, this is dark, man. I don't want to go there, but it's also fair to wonder if he has played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks. And man, oh man, that would be a blow to this team, considering the fact that Filipino was one of the centerpieces, I guess if you could call it that, of the JT Miller trade to the New York Rangers. And not only that, but Filipino, he looked good. He looked fast. He looked exciting coming into the Vancouver Canucks. And I mentioned it prior to his injury. I actually think he was one of the unluckiest Canucks in terms of just not scoring based on what he was producing offensively. Filipino, again, he signed at a pretty good deal here for a couple more seasons if he can get back to full health. And that is the key right there, right? I mean, 5 concussions at the age of 27 years old, if I'm not mistaken. That is a lot of, and that's diagnosed concussions, that is. That's a lot of trauma to a young brain, okay? And man, I've had 0 concussions, and I got enough brain damage from, from a past life, let's call it that. And yeah, it's hard to even fathom what Filipino's going through. And I truly do hope he makes a full recovery. And look, you want to see the good news scenarios out there. I mean, Sidney Crosby had a couple concussions. He comes back and has a long NHL career. You just hope it's the same for Filipino. But, one of the strengths in his game is the fact that he can be so dynamic off the rush, and the fact that he takes chances, which can put himself in position to get injured. And look, the Jason Dickinson hit, F you, Jason Dickinson. But the Jason Dickinson hit was just a dirty play. He had all the time in the world to let up on that hit. But we said it before here on the show, and every dayers know this, Filipino's been taking risks out there. That's just the way he plays the game. He drives to the net with his head down, and that can, lead a player to get lit up in certain occasions. And I do worry about that with Filipino. And if you take that away from his game, what kind of player does he look like when he comes back? Can he be as dynamic as he looked, despite not really putting up the offensive numbers here for his very short time in Vancouver? So one love to Filipino. Get well soon. Again, Rick Tocchet saying he has good days and bad days. He's likely out for the season. He didn't want to completely rule it out, but it sounds like Filipino not going to return until the start of next season. One love to Filipino there. Nils Höglander, I mentioned, hit a bit in the first segment. Again, Rick Tocchet pumping this guy's tires, and bit of an indirect shot at Elias Pettersson. But Nils Höglander out there in a non-contact sweater. He didn't disclose what kind of injury he had, but Nils Höglander looks like he will not play tonight against the Seattle Kraken. So the Canucks, we'll get to it in the third segment and get to some of your comments as well, but they need a pretty big night from the lineup that played well on this road trip despite lacking arguably 3 of the top 6 forwards on this team in Elias Pettersson, Filipino, and Nils Höglander. Rick Tocchet also talked a lot about his contract here, and I said it off the top, and I'll say it again. This, to me, is a non-story. I truly believe that Rick Tocchet is going to re-sign in Vancouver, and hey, some of you might not like that. We had the episode yesterday talking about how Manny Malhotra has transformed the Abbotsford Canucks. We had Brandon Astle on the show. Shout out to the play-by-play voice of the Abbotsford Canucks. Silky smooth, baby. And some of you maybe want to see some more Manny Malhotra in Vancouver in the not-so-distant future. Another bald-headed beauty in the Vancouver Canucks organization. But look, I've said it before. I gave Rick Tocchet last week an A- for his work this season. It's been a tumultuous season in Vancouver with a ton of injury. Look, he's not completely abstinent from blame. This team has been inconsistent. Some of it is his line juggling. Some of it potentially is his system, but I think it's mainly on the players for not executing, the lack of speed from the management group, more so than it is Rick Tocchet's coaching this season. So, of course, he was asked about it ad nauseum in his media availability yesterday about his contract. But look, the Canucks, they're not going to exercise the 1-year option. I would be shocked if they did that. This guy isn't Bruce Boudreau. This is the coach that was handpicked by this management team who just won the Jack Adams, who's done a pretty darn good job this year, in my opinion, compared to, especially in spite of everything that's going on with this team. Rick Tocchet is going to remain a Vancouver Canuck for at least the next couple of seasons. And I'm not saying anything more than a couple, because head coaches, they don't got the longest shelf lives in the NHL. In terms of practice, most of the lines were kept together, but some juggling on the defense pairs. And one of the most interesting changes from the Vancouver Canucks is the fact that Hughes and Hronek split up at practice yesterday. And that comes as not a huge surprise because it's been a little uncharacteristic for them, but they have struggled over the past couple of games for your Vancouver Canucks. I think it's largely due to two factors. I think it's Quinn Hughes not being 100%. And this guy is probably dog tired from putting the team on his back and carrying around 2,000 pounds of pure man on his back for the entire season. And remember, Quinn Hughes is only 180 pounds. That's a tough thing to do. And the second is Quinn Hughes has been taking risks. He knows that the season's on the line for the Vancouver Canucks. He knows they need wins. And I think because of that, he's taken some risks out there for your Vancouver Canucks. But Hughes and Myers were the pair that were paired together at practice. They've been pretty darn good in their minutes together this season, actually. According to Money Puck, if you look at, the Canucks' most regular D and forwards units this season, Hughes and Myers lead the way with a expected goals for percentage of 56.8%. They've been pretty good together. Marcus Pettersson paired with Phil Pronik, Derek Forbort with D. Petey on the third pairing for your Vancouver Canucks. The rest of the line stayed the same, and that's kind of interesting. I'm not going to lie, because look, it's worked out, right? The Canucks haven't necessarily been winning games, but those lines, like the whole team was playing hard, and it's kind of hard to really fault them for that. The Ratty, Joshua, Sherwood line, they had some really great moments on the road trip. The line of Nils Aman and Jonathan Lekarmäki and Linus Karlsson, they certainly had moments. As a line, those three are rocking an expected goals for percentage at about 58% as well. DeBrusk, Suter, and Besser. I mean, the two players that the Canucks probably should have traded away. Yeah, they're trying to get that bag now, and they are showing up for your Vancouver Canucks. So again, it makes sense. There's no changes to the four groups, but we'll see. The Canucks, I'm still on team. Get the wins, chase the playoffs. It's good for this team not to have the loser mentality. I don't really care if they pick 16th or 11th and what's supposed to be a weak draft class. Just go push for the playoffs and get the dub tonight. More about getting the dub and the matchup ahead tonight on the other side. I will also get to some of your comments as well. You're listening to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. We'll be back on the other side after showing it our friends over at Monarch Money. Are you bad with your money? Me too. Wait, did I say I was a financial advisor? Anyways, ever check your bank account and wonder, where the F did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, baby. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps to help you with your finances, just ditch them and start using Monarch Money, because you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. So take back the control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year, baby. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. And hey, man, we're doing this here. I keep saying we because we used to have my co-host, man, but he quit on me, and he quit on the Vancouver Canucks, man. Unbelievable, man. It's life's tough when you don't have your brothers around, man. But you got to make do, man. One love to Kyle Bowen. Speaking of Kyle Bowen, he wanted to give an update to the people here on Locked On Canucks. Kyle Bowen saying, "Today I saw a butterfly, and I'm closer to feeling like that guy. My oh my. Anyways, some call me a baby, but maybe I need to be better for my lady and spend more moments talking less crazy, but maybe I should sip a coffee, but maybe." Kyle Bowen, man, we miss you, buddy. Sending me photos of butterflies, man. Are you okay, man? Why are you sending me photos of butterflies, man? The Canucks are playing games, fighting for the playoff lodge. You send me photos of butterflies, man? Unbelievable, man. What is going on? And look, I'm glad the listeners miss Kyle. Mel Vaughn, a.k.a. Sideshow Bob on the program saying, "Where's Kyle? He quit." I'm not saying Kyle Bowen quit, or am I, man? I don't know. I'm all over the place. Unbelievable stuff here. But one love to Kyle Bowen. Again, we miss you dearly on the show, buddy. Take care of your mental health. Spend more time with your girl. Go catch those butterflies, man. I know Kyle Bowen told me he's trying to become a rapper. He sent me photos of butterflies. I think this guy's going to be a rapper / butterfly catcher, man. Unbelievable stuff. Anyways, man, that's the update on Locked On Canucks. Missing a co-host for now, but we still chugging through here on Locked On Canucks, and I ain't going nowhere until you kick me off this program, man. Let's get some comments here on Locked On Canucks. Comments going off about Elias Pettersson, Rick Tocchet, and the game ahead. Japan 4 in the comments asking, Trevor, how can a young player like EP40 completely fall off the earth and forget to play hockey? Did monsters take his powers? Look, I thought the most likely scenario of why Elias Pettersson has lost his powers is that he got abducted by aliens. The aliens came and took Elias Pettersson. Because to me, that makes more sense than any other theory out here right now. This guy, a point per game player through his first 400 NHL games. A guy who had 10 goals in his first 10 games. And now he's this? Now he's Philip Deneau? What? Again, it's interesting looking at those trade frameworks that I listed in the first segment. And hey, if you just joined us here live, go back and listen to the first few minutes of the show. Because those trades, if you're trading Apex Elias Pettersson, first of all, you're not trading that guy. But none of those deals seem like they're really that good of deals for Elias Pettersson. But when you look at the player that he is now, suddenly those deals look kind of intriguing, right? Caden Lindstrom and a package for Elias Pettersson. Seth Jarvis and Jalen Chatfield for Elias Pettersson. Looking at Yuri Kulich and Zach Benson and picks for Elias Pettersson. For the guy he's been this season, based on what he's making, those all seem like okay packages. And look, Japan, to answer your question, I do think that it is 95% mental with Elias Pettersson. And sure, there's an injury aspect to it as well. But I think it's 95% mental. And I do think this guy needs to, practice some humility. This guy comes out last season with Elliot Friedman saying he wants to make more, or it means more to him. It means something to him to make more than William Nylander. Who cares? Be more like Sidney Crosby. Take way below your market value to help the team out. You haven't won anything yet. But this guy's got the God-given talent to be one of the best players in the NHL. And I think if he stays off his phone, puts whatever mental anguish is going on behind him, he can get back to being one of the best players in the NHL. I'm not saying I'm on team trade Petey. I'm just saying I think there's a chance that he has played his last game for the Vancouver Canucks. What else is going on with the great listeners here of Locked On Canucks? Sev in the comments saying Tocchet needs to leave. He turned our best player Pettersson into a nobody. And Green in the comments kind of talk about Manny Malhotra and Rick Tocchet, saying Manny has done with Abby what Rick Tocchet did with Vancouver last year. He says Tocchet was and is not the issue. It's personnel, plus every star player missed at least 10 games. Demko, Hughes, Miller, Hronik, and Petey. And Greener, member the Discord. Thank you, man. Thank you. Look, I'm not on Team Sev here. And again, shout out to all of you for commenting, listening here on Locked On Canucks. I don't think Tocchet turned Pettersson into a nobody. Pettersson played an incredible stretch of hockey when Tocchet first came to town. From January of 2023 to January of 2024, when Tocchet first took over, Pettersson was one of the best players in the NHL. Right? And then, of course, over the past 14 months and change, it's been a little different. But Pettersson excelled under Rick Tocchet when he first got here. I don't think this is an issue of Rick Tocchet turning Pettersson into a nobody. I think it's Pettersson, dealing with some injuries, dealing with the contract, and just, stuff on the mental side, right? Whether it was the contract, whether it was the conflict with JT Miller, whether it was just, not having enough humility in his life. It is more on Elias Pettersson and not on Rick Tocchet. And like Greener said, Rick Tocchet's done a pretty damn good job this year, at least in my opinion. Greener seems to agree, and we all talked about it. A lot has gone wrong with the Vancouver Canucks this year, not just from the Pettersson-Miller feud, but from all the injuries this team suffered as well. I mean, We talked about it heading into the season when we were drunk off that optimism. This team had a ton of luck in the injury department last year. And usually that doesn't keep up from year to year. But it really did hit the Canucks in a terrible way this season as well. Canucks and Kraken play tonight. Man, oh man, the Canucks are going to need some better efforts against the Seattle Kraken. This is their fourth and final meeting of the season. 2 games have gone to overtime. And, of course, the last game didn't go so well for the Vancouver Canucks. The Kraken beating the Canucks 6-3 back on March 1st. And when you look at points lost in the standings, that was a big one for the Vancouver Canucks. It was a game where they didn't play too bad overall, didn't really get the bounces going their way, and, of course, give up 6 goals to the Seattle Kraken. But they pissed points away against this team this year. Of course, the 5-4 loss back on December the 28th. Hughes and Pettersson were not in that game, but you had a 4-1 lead with 5 minutes to go. I mean, the Canucks have pissed away really 3 points against the Seattle Kraken this year. They did have 1 shootout win over the Kraken. So my message to the Canucks tonight, I know the team is shorthanded. Do not lose to the Kraken at all, but win in regulation. Show that you can be a level above this team even when you're injured. Because I said it earlier this season after that March 1st game, that without Quinn Hughes in the lineup or Elias Pettersson at the apex of his powers, the Vancouver Canucks are basically the Seattle Kraken. Seattle Kraken have good players. They have an okay lineup 1 through 4. They have a pretty good defense. Joey Daccord is basically Kevin Lankinen. There's similarities between these teams. The difference was Hughes and Pettersson. And for tonight, for Quinn Hughes, if he can step up and be that guy, the Vancouver Canucks should win this game. But by God, Canucks, prove us right. Prove that the belief in this team is right. And that you can go and beat the Seattle Kraken handily because you pissed away 3 points against them this season. Oh, that was hard not to piss myself there in anger, man. Hopefully you didn't piss yourself watching the show. What? But we appreciate the hell out of you for tuning into Locked On Canucks. Whether you're an everydayer, an occasional listener, or a first-time listener, a new subscriber, or you join us on the live show on YouTube, we appreciate the hell out of each and every one of you. Go Canucks, go. The dream ain't dead yet. Although Elias Pettersson, he might have played his last game with the Vancouver Canucks. Go interact with us wherever you interact with podcasts. If you like what we're doing, go subscribe and like on YouTube. On the podcast side, go follow us and leave a 5-star review. For now, I got to get the hell out of here. I'm Trevor Beggs, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.